Welcome back to season 6 of Hot Mess Espresso, guys. We have my girly girl Ruth on today for a little compare and contrast mini series of Borderline. How are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
Good. It's been a crazy day, but we're here. We're doing the things. So, how did you get diagnosed?
So that's a really roundabout question. Lots of childhood trauma, um, lots of self-sabotage leading to a intensive inpatient treatment.
Mm.
Um, and after being in therapy for many years due to said childhood trauma,
Mm-hmm.
I then went into this inpatient treatment center, turned 18 while I was there, and was officially given my diagnosis because, as you know, borderline legally cannot be diagnosed until you turn 18. It will be listed as a ungeneralized mood disorder.
Ungeneralized. I love that. Like it's really specific, but we can't specify until you're 18, which I'm totally fine with because,
Absolutely.
like, I think we throw a lot of diagnoses at kids and then we're just like, oops, just kidding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's not good. So, I don't know how much of this do you want to dive into? Onto like, the fun layers of how you got
Um,
diagnosed.
the fun layers. Why don't we just do kind of the key points?
Yeah.
Um, so when I say childhood trauma, it started out really young. I
Mm-hmm.
was adopted, technically placed for adoption twice before the age of 2. Um, they realized in the process of the first adoption that I was what is called reactive attachment disorder,
Mm-hmm.
meaning you do or do not create an emotional connection with people. Their therapy for that is literally setting the child into the arms of whoever they are or are not creating a bond with, and that person latching their arms around the child. To say that I did not do well is an understatement. My social worker actually says that she heard me screaming like my skin was being ripped off my body from outside the office, and she had to turn around and walk away.
Yeah,
Um,
that's oh God. No.
yes. So already had some mood issues before
Mm-hmm.
I was even 2 years old.
That's fine.
Um, exactly. Fast forward, I get adopted into this absolutely wonderful family, um, for the most part.
Yeah. We'll get there. I already know the backstory, guys, but I think it's
We will.
vital.
Um, in that second adoption placement, I was separated from both my biological mother and my only full-blood biological sibling. He stayed with the first placement. So obviously had an issue with abandonment in my head. Um, Starting from a very young age, I was a victim of sexual assault for many, many years from someone who was supposed to be very trustworthy. I kept that hidden until right before I turned 16, and accidentally let out the information that that was happening, um, during school, no less. So when that entire investigation was happening, I was currently in high school. I got removed from my classes by officers. I was held down in the counselor's office for many hours, and then after being told that I would not be leaving school, was removed from the school by the same cops that I had never met before that day and taken to a place called Children's Justice Center. Great place, great values, poor execution.
Yeah, what do I say all the time? In theory, wonderful. Practically applied, the worst.
Absolutely. It honestly, they did everything they could to try and make me comfortable, but I was
Hmm.
already traumatized, and they left me in a room with a camera that was turned on, and I could see the red flashing light.
I feel like that would set anybody off, especially having
Oh, yeah.
admitted all of that and then being like, "Oh, shit." Like,
Well, when they left me alone in the room, they had heard the story once, but they had to bring me back down to get a video recording of what was going on, which is why they left me alone in said room with said camera. But then they came back in and redid the questioning all over again. The amount of times that I told my story that day and after that day has been excruciatingly painful.
I'm sure. I'm absolutely sure. I'm beyond appreciate you even opening up here. I know
Oh, absolutely.
I know it's a lot, even if you've gone over it a million times and stuff, it doesn't make it any easier.
Absolutely. Um, so post going through that process, again, I was in therapy
Mm-hmm.
regularly. My family had imploded from the inside out. Um, I developed anxiety. I developed depression. I was an ADHD kid, technically ADD, but still on the same type of medications. Um, I really wasn't eating because of the dosage of my medications. So there was definitely times of anorexia. There were times where it was strictly because I was on my medication and eating made me physically ill, but I was in
Yes.
dance every single day of my high school career. I had at least one dance class, and I wouldn't eat and go into these dance classes and literally pass out in the middle of class.
Mm-hmm.
And my coach would quite literally start keeping fruit and granola bars in her office because of me. It was so bad. Um, Fast forward to senior year,
Mm-hmm.
I was still delving into all my emotions about everything that had happened previously. Um, and a fire happened in the auto shop of my school. I remember it being this huge thing, but I think it's because I was really struggling. I wasn't doing well with grades. I was trying to work on homework in the tech lab of my school when the fire alarm went off, because if I didn't get my grades up, the threat was that I was going to be removed from school.
Mm.
It, granted, I was that student who would constantly bring my grades up just to get out of the punishment, and then they would fall again. I
Right.
was working, I was going to school, I was going to therapy, and my family was imploding constantly over and over again.
Yeah,
So
that's a
that was a
lot
whole,
for yeah, that's a lot for a 30-year-old to handle, let alone a 16, 17-year-old.
absolutely. Um, so I remember it being this big explosion, lots of flames. From what I have heard after talking to people who were also around and could see the fire, it was really relatively small, but in my heightened sense of emotion,
Mm-hmm.
I could have sworn that the car blew up, honestly. Um, so we got removed from the school for the fire. They put it out. Everyone went back in. I was freaking out on the field with one of my best friends, and she's like, "We got to get you out of here. Yeah, I understand that you're under pressure, but you have got to remove yourself from the situation for a little while. We have to leave." Um, I got caught sleeping, and I called my therapist at the time, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "I'm not doing well. I think I need to go to inpatient."
Right.
And that was a conversation that me and my best friend at the time had had. She had also gone through her own inpatient for her own situations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was just desperate to finally get some serious help.
Right.
So my therapist did what she had to do because I was a minor. She called
Right.
my mother. My mother was furious. I had sloughed school. I was
Mm-hmm.
failing classes. Instead of telling her that I needed help, I called someone who only knew me from hour-long sessions once a week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Mind you, she had been my therapist for a couple years at the time. So she was like my lifeline.
Right.
Um, and my mom did what she needed to, found me an inpatient center, and I checked in that night. Um, went through that whole process of inpatient. As soon as I got out, I I had already finished all of my schooling
Hmm.
because even though I kept letting my grades slip down into D's, I was technically still on track to graduate.
Right.
Um, in order to go into said inpatient treatment that I was going to do, or I guess post inpatient, I was going to go into a day treatment program. Um, there was about a week to a week and a half lapse between when I got out of inpatient and when I could go into day treatment, just
Right.
because they were waiting for a spot to open up. So once that happened, I went to a secondary school, or a, not secondary, but a, I can't even think of the word, alternative high
Oh, okay.
school.
Yeah.
I literally had one packet that I needed to do, took the test, and I had my diploma in hand the day afterwards.
Atta girl.
So before I even hit day treatment, I was a graduate. I had gone through, if I remember correctly, a week and a half to 2 weeks of inpatient treatment, and I went into this day treatment program. Now, part of day treatment is, yes, they have you do schoolwork, but it's consistently based around group therapy, personal therapy, meeting with psychiatrists, making sure that all your levels are being hit. And I had the same psychiatrist both in inpatient and day treatment.
That's
Um,
amazing.
I was like coming up on turning 18 very, very quickly.
Hmm.
And during the several weeks that I was in the day treatment program, it was all a DBT based therapy,
Right.
essentially. So dialectual behavioral therapy.
Yep.
Um, by time, like literally the day before I turned 18, or I want to say maybe even a week or two, I had gone through all of their different assignments that they give for therapy work
Hmm.
already, and they wanted me to start repeating assignments. And I was
Okay.
like, I don't have schoolwork to do. I understand that you guys gave me extra work because I had to be doing something, but I'm not repeating the same assignments over and over
Right.
again. It's just not gonna happen.
That'd be such a pain in the ass.
It was. So, because I was freshly turning 18, because I was signing myself out of the program officially, that's when they were able to start writing, she has borderline personality disorder.
Hmm.
And that was a whole, like, I came to that realization after losing my therapist because she was moving out of state.
Hmm.
I had just been told, well, you have a mood disorder, but it's made up of all these various different personality disorders that were already diagnosed. And I was like, oh, okay.
Right.
Being on like all of the different medications,
Hmm.
that was a hoot. Um, and honestly, just so much of the way I was brought up,
Hmm.
living in a state that is primarily run by a church, being in an area where females have little value
Hmm.
as people in general.
Hmm.
Um, I think that so much of what creates someone to receive our diagnosis is their surroundings.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. What was it like when you got your diagnosis? Was it freeing? Was it terrifying? Was it, oh, this makes sense? Like, were you trying to
Um,
literally kind of equate everything back to BPD? Because, it's the whole identity thing, which we'll get into next episode. But, were you, what was your initial like reaction? And then how did that reaction like work its way out over time?
well, I was 18,
Right.
so my first thought process, wholeheartedly and honestly, was I don't give a fuck. It's a label. I'm,
Right.
I'm glad you guys think you know what's wrong with me because in my head, I knew better. I knew everything better than they did. I was the only person who had gone through what I had gone through. No one could tell me what was wrong with me.
Right.
So it took a lot of self-reflection over the years for me to go, no, okay, I can see how this measures up. It took a
Mm-hmm.
lot of self-studying because after losing that therapist, I tried to go to several other therapists afterwards and having to rehatch the past in order to get to the meat and potatoes of what is going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I could never get past that stage with new therapists. They were either too cold or it just wasn't, there wasn't a connection there where I felt comfortable enough to even speak to them. I couldn't be around men for the longest time. It was a whole problem. And when you've, my poor therapist at the time, I blatantly lied to her over and over again about how I was really doing. And I distinctly remember her telling me, because after I got out of inpatient, we scheduled an appointment for me to see her, and that's when she told me she was leaving. And I
Oof.
distinctly remember her telling me she was so pissed at me for lying to her about how I was doing. Because I had the classic suicidal ideations and
Mm-hmm.
a couple attempts under my belt at that time.
Right.
And I was not forthcoming with those at all.
It's hard to. You have to
Oh, it
really like
absolutely is.
you got to be really comfortable with somebody, and even when you are really comfortable with somebody, you got to be even more comfortable than that, I feel.
Well, especially when me telling my truth as a sophomore in high school completely imploded the life of my entire family.
Yeah,
Telling my truth no longer felt safe. It didn't matter
exactly.
who I was telling my truth to. If I told someone what was really going on, everything was going to blow up, things were going to
Hmm.
fall apart, I was going to be the problem for everybody. I did not feel comfortable, safe, or stable in telling people, yeah, I'm not doing well. I'm hurting myself in this way. I've been breaking every boundary I could in this way. Like,
Hmm.
how do you tell someone who believes that they have destroyed everyone they love's life by telling the truth that they're safer if they tell the truth? They'll
Exactly.
never believe you.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't believe that either. But circling, you said something kind of like really interesting with all of this, and I just kind of also want to know, how did you kind of come to terms with that of starting to feel like you did the right thing, and like, you should have done by coming forward and stuff.
So, ironically, it was not therapy whatsoever. Um, my partner, my saving grace, and my other half,
We love him.
when we love him
We
truly,
love him so much.
um, when he met me, it was a week before I turned 19, so a
Hmm.
full year after this. Um, we met through work, um, and he found me at probably the most broken I had ever been
Hmm.
because post leaving inpatient and day treatment, I still did not start healing for
Right.
quite a while.
You don't.
Um, no, not at all. Um, he taught me a lot of hard lessons about setting boundaries and
Hmm.
seeing my worth. And as I told him my story, and I was cowering as I'm telling this story, he literally looks at me and goes, I will never let anyone hurt you again. No one will ever come near you to harm you. And I melted. He reinstilled in me that I did absolutely nothing wrong. And to this day, when I even start to lower that boundary for even a moment, he's like, no, they don't deserve that part of you. They don't deserve to be in your life that way. You deserve better.
Right, absolutely.
So that
We love
is
him.
wholeheartedly how I came to realize that it's fine to speak my truth and it is fine to be as loud, obnoxious, and stubborn about it
Mm-hmm.
as I want to be.
Right, absolutely. So, how did you start to come to terms with the diagnosis, especially since you had said previously that like you were just like, no.
um, so that was also part of the setting up boundaries because
Mm-hmm.
I had to sit there and really think about, well, why do I let people come towards me and affect me this way? Why do I keep trying to forgive people who continuously hurt me over and over and over again?
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I was trying to think about why I was continuing to allow my abuser, first and foremost, back into my life, I had to sit there and think about, well, what have they done to deserve being involved in my life?
Right.
Because post sentencing,
Mm-hmm.
to this day, the only apology that I have ever received from that man was in my therapist's office. And if I remember correctly, it was court mandated. He has never once apologized to me in person, by text, by phone since that date.
I'm sorry, a court mandated apology.
Well, I know it was a court mandated therapy session. It was the only way he was allowed to see me.
Oh, okay. That's all right. Okay.
It was so tumultuous that I would be kicked out of my household so that he could come do planned and supervised visitation with my younger sibling. And I just had to go find somewhere else to be. I couldn't come back home until it was 100% confirmed that he was gone. Sometimes I couldn't find plans, and I just would have to go wander aimlessly. Sometimes I wasn't allowed to take the vehicle, and I would have to just figure out how I was getting wherever I was gonna go.
I love our system. I love it. It's great.
Oh, it was a blast and a hoot. My favorite
Yeah.
experience of my life.
So then I guess the question is like how are you doing with the diagnosis now? Like has it been bumped down? Are you still technically I don't know what the actual term is, so I don't know why I said technically, but are you
um,
how are you dealing with having it kind of thing?
you said bump down because technically you go from borderline to CPSD.
Yeah.
Um, First off, I think you need to go to therapy in order to really be confirmed that you were bumped down. Something of which I have not done in years.
Mhm.
I do self therapy at this point.
Right.
Um, and that is going to come into play when we go to our compare and contrast. However, I would not say that I had the support system that allowed, established, and maintained a situation where I could continue going into therapy, uh, and that really helped pursue a therapist that met my needs in order to continue going. So I would consider myself to be probably on the lower scale, if not CPSD at this point, but again, I'm not a professional.
Right.
I just have done a lot of research and self reflection post having my diagnosis.
That makes sense. Um like, I mean, you and I have talked about it a bunch, but there's a lot of, I don't want to say misinformation, but there's just a lot of assumptions about
Absolutely.
borderline and how borderlines. I literally have a friend that is dating someone with BPD, and every time they get in a fight, I get to see a Facebook status about how all borderlines are this or borderlines are that. And I like it literally takes everything in me not to rage text that person and be like, you've known me for how many years? Cut the shit. But so having said that, have you had people the second that they find out that you're borderline say some like some weird shit to your face, or have you not really experienced a lot of the assumptions and the, I guess, myths and stuff like that when it comes to borderline?
Um, well, it's hard for them to make fun of it when I make fun of it myself.
Also
The
accurate.
the constant discussion of, well, my man don't need to cheat because I got enough personalities to keep him busy for days.
Yeah.
Um, that's the number one joke in our household, and I'm the one making it.
Right.
So now, obviously, there's the standard, oh, you have insert diagnosis here, so you're crazy. I should stay away from you.
Oh, I
Um,
love that one.
there's ignorance everywhere.
Yep.
Common sense is expensive, and people these days are damn broke. That's it, it is what it is. If
It
someone
is.
has something to say about something to do with me and they don't even know me, I don't care anymore. Years ago, I would have broke down, cried, and probably been crying about it for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point in my life, as long as I'm good, my partner's good, and my family's good, I don't care what you say, do, or think. Are you giving me any of the three F's? Are we
Yeah.
financing,
If
fucking,
you
or
know, you
feeding?
know.
No. Like, legitimately, if you do not have value in my life,
Mm-hmm.
whether I have given you that value or you have produced that value yourself, I don't care what you say about me or my disorder or anything, because, quite frankly, my partner doesn't even grasp the concept of mental health.
Right.
He was raised by someone who is from the era of men don't cry, you just handle your business, you take care of your emotions in
Yep.
private. I understand that he's never really going to understand where I'm coming from. That's fine. He still supports me, loves me, and
Exactly.
handles my swings to the best of his abilities. There are times where he's looking at me and he's like, "Why are you crying? What's wrong?" And I'm literally sitting there and I'm like, "I don't know because I'm pissed. I shouldn't be crying. I want to be screaming.
Right.
But here we are."
Right. Yep.
So, yes, I have had the ignorant comments. I
Mm-hmm.
just legitimately don't care enough to actually listen anymore.
It's a good piece of advice to have, honestly,
Yeah.
because only you know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sure. Well, next week we are comparing and contrasting the 9 characteristics of borderline because again, I am not the poster child for it. I am just the girl that's yapping behind a mic, begging people to just not believe everything you see on TV when it comes to this stuff. So we're next week we're gonna do a little bit of a compare contrast and we're gonna go over all of the things when it comes to this disorder and what it is and probably more importantly what it's not. So catch us next week. And Ruth, thank you so much for coming on and doing this.
My absolute pleasure.
So I beyond appreciate you.
Of course.